year, Sonus Faber's Concertino turns 30, and to celebrate, the designers at Sonus Faber have created the G4. The Concertino has always been a two-way ported bookshelf speaker. However, Sonus Faber's commitment to design and sustainable luxury has taken the G4 in a new direction. And speaking of sustainability, the G4's 1-inch silk dome tweeter with DAD technology is paired to a 5-inch long throw paper mid-bass driver resting inside a cork. Yes, cork enclosure. Now, cork is considered a sustainable material. You can harvest cork without harming the tree, plus the bark regenerates, which means it can be harvested multiple times during the tree's lifespan. Now, according to Sonus Faber, another benefit of using cork is that it reduces internal resonances while also reducing the need for additional dampening materials inside the cabinet, which obviously will cut down on waste. The speaker features a thoughtful enclosure housing 2 drivers and a rear-facing port that delivers a frequency response ranging from 60 Hz to 25 kHz. While not quite full range, this still sets the stage for a captivating audio experience. With a nominal impedance of 4 ohms and a sensitivity of 85 dB, this speaker needs a robust amplifier to truly shine. In my listening test, I paired the Concertino with 3 different amplifiers: the Marantz Model 10, the musical Fidelity NuVista 600.2, and finally, Macintosh's MC312 amplifier paired with their latest AV processor, the MX200, serving as a stereo preamp. Now, all 3 amplifiers had enough muscle to push the Sonus Faber to its limits, but it was the musical Fidelity and Macintosh setups that ultimately delivered the most immersive and enjoyable listening experience. Now, the speakers in this review are among the first 300 pairs of Concertino speakers to be released, known as the Maestro Edition, and they come with a unique plaque that showcases their special status. While this sets them apart, to my knowledge, there aren't any other features that would distinguish the Maestro pairs from those that may be released later. One aspect that will remain across all G4s is their finish. All Concertino speakers are wrapped in a plant-based leather made from Sicilian oranges and pears. Now, I've been skeptical of faux leather materials in the past, but I'm happy to say that the plant-based leather Sonus Faber has sourced here totally looks and feels authentic. Like older generation Concertinos, the new G4 still features the speaker's trademark wood side panels, though this generation is fitted with solid walnut that not only dresses the speaker up, but it also adds to the cabinet's just overall rigidity. What surprised me most was how compact this speaker is. Its asymmetrical shape helps to disguise its overall visual presence, so much so that, at least to me, they actually appear smaller than the LUMINA 2s despite having roughly the same physical footprint. When it comes to getting the G4s to sound their best, Sonus Faber recommends placing the speakers approximately 3 feet or 1 meter from any boundaries or walls, with at least 2 meters or 6 feet resting between them. Now, in our room, they sounded their best placed about 18 inches off our fabric wall with about 9.5 feet between them. I also listened to them on their matching but optional stands, which adds about $1,500 to the speaker's overall cost. The stands come with substantial gold finish spikes, though for this review, I opted to fit my isoacoustic feet to the stand to save our polished concrete floors. Set up this way, the Concertinos produced a respectable in-room response with the bass rolling off between 40 and 50 Hz. The rest of the response followed a very predictable downward slope that some of you may feel is reminiscent of a Harman-like curve. When these first arrived, I was evaluating the Marantz Model 10 integrated amplifier, and I have to admit that this pairing initially put me off the G4s. It was actually the Concertinos that helped me pinpoint the characteristics of the Marantz sound, which I ultimately found to be a little sterile and dynamically soft, hence my initial negative impressions. Now, when I connected the speakers to the NuVista 600.2, my opinion started to change and take shape. The Concertino sound is smooth and natural. There's a seductive quality that feels very mellow, but it still has just enough contrast in the upper mid-range and treble to keep things interesting, especially when using amps like the musical Fidelity or the Macintosh. In other words, if you're drawn to the clipped sound, these may not be for you. The Concertino is not a bright, forward, or brittle-sounding speaker. It has good treble extension, but nothing that is going to become fatiguing as you turn things up. Now, directly compared to the LUMINA 2s, which retail for a fifth as much, the Concertino does sound more dampened top to bottom, and as a result, you might feel that it sounds more subdued. I'm not suggesting that the Concertino is boring. It's just more composed, neutral, and refined than the livelier LUMINA 2. This composure carries over to the mid-range, where I found the Concertino incredibly easy to listen to and enjoy. While this speaker responds very well to power and volume, I really enjoyed listening to my jazz playlists at more ambient or background volumes. But for maximum intelligibility, especially with lyrics and dialogue, in-room volumes greater than 60 dB will give you the best results. Still, even at louder levels, the timbre of the speaker itself doesn't shift. Instruments and vocals simply scale rather than change in tone, which is what you want, and honestly, what you should expect from a speaker of this caliber. This brings me to the bass. For such a compact speaker, it has good weight, but I wouldn't go so far as to say the G4 has bass. Put on a movie or some decent electronica and you will find its limits pretty quickly. Compared to the less expensive LUMINA 2, the Concertino sounded a little smaller in terms of overall scale, but having only a 5-inch woofer, I think Sonus Faber can keep their head high with what they've coaxed out of the Concertino. When it goes low, it doesn't sound chesty or resonant. It remains focused and detailed, but yeah, for proper full-range playback, obviously, a subwoofer is required. Moving on to soundstage and dynamics, the Concertino's image like champions, orally disappearing within a very nicely appointed, albeit composed and slightly recessed soundstage. Center imaging is solid. I found that there was very little audible drift as I changed positions along our 9-foot sofa. The Concertino doesn't give you a live or that you are there feeling when you're listening. It's far more studio and intimate. It has good dispersion, especially between the speakers, but it's not likely to transform the whole front wall of your room into the recording space or venue. Again, think intimate and cozy, not stadium. And it's a similar story when it comes to dynamics. This is not an explosive speaker, but the G4 has good reflexes and enough spice here and there to make it enjoyable. It handles volume and dynamic shifts well, never becoming aggressive or worse, distorting when pushed. Admittedly, the LUMINA 2s will no doubt sound a bit more lively or dynamic, but I'm not sold that that makes them, quote, better. It's just a different overall experience, one that some of you will be into and others maybe less so. At $5,000 for the pair and an additional $1,500 for the stands, the Concertinos lean more luxury than mass market, and in doing so, obviously, expectations, they rise. Knowing that a simple plaque distinguishes the first 300 pairs is, in my opinion, a miss. Perhaps if Sonus Faber were more thoughtful about its placement instead of the plaque being located on the same side of each speaker, they could have, created mirrored or book-matched pairs. But they didn't, which does seem to fly in the face of their more Italian atelier reputation. Now, maybe this matters to you, maybe it doesn't, but as someone who appreciates luxury goods, little things like this, they make a big difference. I applaud the brand's move towards sustainability and cruelty-free manufacturing. But if you're not going to use traditional luxury materials, for example, genuine leather, you have to up the ante in other ways, and a simple brass plaque just isn't enough. Kicking off comparisons, starting with the LUMINA 2s, which we've had for, I think, 3 years now. The LUMINA 2 is arguably the best bang-for-the-buck speaker Sonus Faber makes, and yes, that includes the LUMINA Tower speakers. Now, I wasn't expecting a night and day difference between the LUMINA 2 and our Concertino G4, and I didn't get one. Is the Concertino better? Objectively speaking, yes, but will listeners choose it over the LUMINA 2s 100% of the time? I don't think I'd put money on that. Both are great options, and if you have the funds and the ability to build around its more specialized needs, i.e., get a better amp, I think the long-term ownership experience of the Concertino will be greater compared to the LUMINA 2. That said, if you want a speaker that gets you 90% of the way there with a little bit more flavor and some tude, the LUMINA 2 is that speaker. Similar in price to the recently reviewed Clarity 6.2s from Radiant Acoustics, I would rather have the Sonus Faber, even if I will fully admit to you that the Radiants are, objectively speaking, the better speaker. The Radiant does play lower, though both speakers need a good amplifier to perform at their best, but those two things aside, I prefer the overall tone of the Concertinos to that of the ultra-precise Clarity 6.2s. But for about $500 less, you can score a pair of B&W 705 S3 signatures in either of their limited edition finishes. The B&W is going to be a totally different animal, one that if you love it, you are really gonna love it. But if you don't, well, you've already left your B&W sucks comment below, haven't you? I love the 705 S3 and would choose it over the Sonus Faber, but that's just me. I get that I would be giving up the G4's handmade pedigree as well as its more organic material choices like faux leather and wood, which I prefer to the B&W's gloss finishes. Nevertheless, the 705 is the more interesting, engaging, and exciting speaker, all things considered. But the dark horse option would be the brand's own powered DUETTOS. If the thought of saving money by going with an active smart speaker over an entire stack of gear is intriguing, don't sleep on the Sonus Faber DUETTOS. The DUETTOS will sound larger with more bass and be more dynamic than the Concertinos or the LUMINA 2s. The DUETTOS give you that Sonus Faber sound and look for less than a pair of Concertinos. So needless to say, you have some choices to make. Even though there are some speakers I personally would pick over the new Concertinos, I still really like them, and I believe they sit in a real sweet spot for customers who are curious about the brand, who are willing to spend more for the Italian craftsmanship that comes with a Sonus Faber speaker, but who may not be ready to go full send on the brand's higher-end models. So that's it, everyone. That is now my take on Sonus Faber's new Concertino G4 bookshelf loudspeaker. What did you guys think? What did you guys think? I really want to know. A lot of you seem very intrigued and excited about Sonus Faber speakers. I'm always happy when we have them on the channel, so let's get the conversation going. If I left anything out or there's a comparison that you would like me to touch upon, you know what to do. Leave it in the comments below. Never know. Could end up in next week's Unplugged. Until then, remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you, as always, for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day. And we will see you on the next video. Bye.